The Sufi orders celebrate the birth of Sidi Jaber al-Ansari in Alexandria next Thursday. The delegation portal provides an overview of Sidi Jaber. The Sidi Jaber Mosque is located in the neighborhood named after him, between the tram station and Port Said Street, facing Mustafa Kemal Military Hospital. The mosque was initially a small corner built in the middle of the 7th century AH, and this corner remained in its condition until a mosque was built on its ruins at the end of the 19th century AD. In 1955 AD, the old mosque was removed to build the current mosque in its place. And Alexandria in the Islamic era, which began with the conquest of Egypt by Amr ibn al-As in the year 642 AD, became a meeting place for many scholars, imams, and righteous saints, and as it is the Acropolis in Greek architecture, the mosque became in the middle of the city and its streets end to it. Ibn al-Hakam, the owner of the oldest historical text that reached us about the mosques of Alexandria, which is the book Conquests of Egypt, says that it was in the city of Alexandria in the first half of the 1st century AH, in addition to the Amr ibn al-As mosque. It is most likely that it was located in the same place that the mosque now occupies. Al-Amari al-Atiq, adjacent to the shrine of Abi al-Darda, there were 5 other mosques, namely, the Mosque of the Prophet Musa, peace be upon him, the Mosque of Solomon, peace be upon him, the Mosque of Tul-Karnain, the Al-Qadr Mosque, peace be upon him, and the Al-Rama Mosque, which was built by Amr ibn al-As in Alexandria immediately after its conquest waterfalls. Opinions differed about the personality of the owner of the mosque, who is buried in the shrine next to the mosque, and by his name the mosque was known. Sheikh Jaber al-Ansari grew up in Andalusia, then traveled to Fez in the country of Morocco, then moved to Tripoli, Libya, then came to Cairo, and stayed as a guest of one of his cousins, whose nickname was Abu al-Abbas, and he was a Sufi man, so Jaber al-Ansari joined him and learned from him. When Sheikh Abu al-Abbas died, Sheikh Abu Ishaq Jaber moved to Alexandria and built a corner for him in the suburb of Raml, later turned into the current mosque. And the sheikh remained residing in that corner until he died in the year 697 AH, at the age of 90. Sidi Jaber was a scholar, devout, righteous, and ascetic. People loved him and many of his followers, lovers, and students who drew from his knowledge. He wrote some books, including 1. Finding Proof in the Miraculousness of the Quran, and the book How to Tourism in the Course of Rhetoric and Eloquence, and the book Parsing and Controlling the Factors of Parsing. Description of the mosque. The current mosque consists of a square in the middle of which is a covered courtyard, surrounded by arcades on all sides. There are 2 arcades in the direction of the Qibla, and 1 arcade in the other 3 sides. Above the northern arcade there is a second layer dedicated to women's prayers. As for the mosque's courtyard, it was covered with a higher ceiling than the rest of the ceiling the mosque. Windows have been opened at this height for lighting. The mosque has 3 doors or entrances. Among them a door on the southern side, from the side of the tram, that leads to the mosque as well as to the shrine of Sidi Jaber. There is also a door on the northern side, that opens on Port Said Street. There is a 3rd door from the western side, facing Sidi Jaber Palace for tasting. There is the shrine of Sidi Jaber al-Ansari on the southern side of the mosque. It is a square room. 2. What Dr. Swadmar mentioned. First, in al-Suyuti's book, known as Dar al-Sahaba for those who entered Egypt from among the companions, so we found 4 of the companions who came to Egypt and were called by the name Jaber. The first, Jaber bin Abdullah bin Amr bin Haram al-Ansari. And he is called Abu Abdullah, Abu Abd al-Rahman, and Abu Muhammad, and he is a companion. Muslim narrated from him that he fought with the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, 19 battles. And on the authority of Hisham bin Urwa, he said, Jabir bin Abdullah had a field in the Prophet's mosque, knowledge was taken from him. And Ibn Abd al-Hakam told us Abdullah bin Yusuf Hadith said that Jabir bin Abdullah came to Maslama bin Mukhald, and he was the governor of Egypt, and He said to him, "Send to Uqba bin Amr al-Yuhani so that I can ask him about a hadith he heard from the Messenger of God, may God bless him and grant him peace, about retribution, and there is no one left to narrate it from the Messenger of God. God, may God's prayers and peace be upon him, changed him *. I wanted to hear him before he died or I die." And Al-Suyuti and the people of Egypt mention about 10 hadiths from him *, and the last of the companions of the Prophet, may God's prayers and peace be upon him, to die in Medina was Jabir after he became blind in the year 78, and it was said 7, and it was said in the year 4, and it was said that he was 63, it was said that he lived 94 years. The second, Jabir bin Majah al-Sadafi. Ibn Yunus said, "A delegation came to the Prophet, may God bless him and grant him peace, and witnessed the conquest of Egypt." The third, Jabir bin Yasser bin Uwaid. Ibn Qutaybah said he was mentioned among the companions, and Ibn Yunus witnessed the conquest of Egypt, and he is the grandfather of Jabir and Ayash bin Abbas bin Jabir, and no hadith of him is known. Fourth, Jabir bin Osama al-Yuhani. Nicknamed Abu Swad, he went down to Egypt and died there. 3. Ahmed Zaki Pasha says, "My master Jabir, who is buried in Alexandria, is the traveler Ibn Jubair," and he explains that the common people distorted the name, so they said Jabir instead of Jubair *, and he says that he is Jabir bin Ishaq bin Ibrahim bin Ahmed bin Muhammad al-Ansari, and he is called Abu Ishaq. He grew up in Andalusia, then migrated to Persia in the Maghreb, then moved to Tripoli, and from there a delegation to Cairo, so a man from his cousins hosted him. His nickname is Abu al-Abbas, and his name is not known according to the investigation. Until he died in the year 697 AH, over 90 years old. My master Jabir was a pious and righteous sheikh who had many followers interested in language, grammar and morphology, in addition to his interest in religious affairs. 4. What Ali Pasha Mubarak mentioned. 1. Ali Pasha Mubarak says in Al-Qatat al-Tawfiqiyya, Vol. 2. Ali Pasha Mubarak says in the Conciliatory Plans, Vol. Sidi Jabir, except in Part 8 page 42, mentioned him saying, "Ibn Jubair is Abu al-Hasan Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Jubair al-Kanani, one of the departed from Andalusia to the east. He was born in Valencia on the 10th of Rabi al-Awwal in the year 540 AH. He cut off a lush branch from its orchards, and it withered in his hand, then he chanted, not alienated from the homeland, and mentioned the expenses of the nuclei. As for you see the branch with what differentiated the original with. His journey was from Granada, he arrived in Alexandria, made a pilgrimage, and traveled to the Levant, Iraq, the island, and others. He died in Alexandria on the 27th of Shaban in the year 614 AH. 5. What Dr. Said Abu al-Assad mentioned in attaining tangible bounties by visiting al-Albayt and the righteous in Egypt, p. He grew up, may God be pleased with him, in Andalusia, then he migrated to Persia, Morocco, then he moved to Tripoli in the west, and from there a delegation to Cairo, so a man from his cousins, and his nickname was Abu al-Abbas hosted him, and he was a Sufi. Many followers interested in language, grammar, and morphology, in addition to his interest in religious affairs, and behind a scientific wealth, including finding proof in the inimitability of the Quran, how to travel in the course of rhetoric and eloquence, and parsing and controlling the factors of parsing. 6. We now leave the speech to the female figure, Hassan Qasim. Perhaps the truest word said about Sheikh Jabir. This is the speech of Professor Bashir al-Shandi, the custodian of the Library of Alexandria, if he had not relied entirely on the author of Ghamam al-Rashidi Mosque, which was completed in the year 1325, because we do not, in any way, accept the death of Sheikh Jabir, which was mentioned in the translation. Tomorrow, we learn that Ibn al-Rashid Muhammad bin Omar al-Firi is the Imam and preacher of the Mosque of Granada, the author of the journey marked, with the fullness of defect, while collecting the length of occultation in the journey to Mecca and Thebes, which occupies about 6 volumes, some of which are found in the municipal library. He was born in Ceuta, from the country of Andalusia, in the year 657 AH and immigrated to Egypt for the first time in the year 685 AH, then returned from it to Granada and departed a second time, arriving in Egypt in the year 691 AH. If we know this and compare that date with the date of the death of Sheikh Jaber, which was mentioned by Professor Shindi, which is in the year 779 AH, then it becomes clear to us the important error that occurred to the author of Riyad al-Azza, then that a book like this was interesting that we cannot rely on in producing an author of its kind. About the sites and shrines of the city of Alexandria and the biographies of its scholars and reformers are what Professor al-Shandi will concern us with, unless we add to him several sources concerned with this heritage, because we cannot be certain in any case that al-Zahar absorbed all of the scholars and reformers buried in Alexandria. For this occasion, I felt compelled to direct Professor Hijazi's view that what was published in the July 11th communiqué on this subject is not closer to the truth, and it is not a separation of discourse, but between it and the truth is a distance between the two easts. Because the word of Professor al-Shandi does not seek from it that Jabir al-Sahabi is the grandfather of this Jaber, but rather it is like the ratio of the grandchildren to the grandfathers. And because al-Suyuti in his books of good lecture did not encompass all the scholars of Egypt and its righteousness, and that what was mentioned in it does not meet 10/10 of what was known from them in every century in Egypt from what was meant by other sources and scenes, even if he was the most knowledgeable of scholars, and this is only because of a need in the soul of Jacob, which we touched from his book mentioned. And because Professor Hassan Mansour Bey is not an argument, and they're saying this is not what is considered as a fixed historical text for such a difficult problem, and the distance between the supporters of Advan and the supporters of Granada, of which Sheikh Jaber is located, may be amended between heaven and earth. In the end, I thank Jason for your follow-up. We hope to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell button, and do not forget to like. We also await your support through the super chat and the thank you feature.